If you've ever entered a room and felt someone silently observing you, without drawing attention, without showing off, yet still seeming to occupy all the space, perhaps you've felt a slight discomfort without knowing why. It wasn't arrogance, it wasn't a direct threat, it wasn't anything explicit, yet something there affected you. What if I told you that this discomfort doesn't arise by chance, that there's a deep psychological and emotional reason why low-profile people cause so much impact and even fear without saying almost anything? Perhaps, as you listen to this, a part of you is already recognizing yourself. Because deep down, this topic isn't just about others, it's about who you are when you don't need to prove anything. It's about the silent power of those who don't constantly seek validation. And above all, it's about the discomfort that silence provokes in a world addicted to noise. We live in an era where existing seems synonymous with showing off. Those who don't expose themselves, who don't over-explain, who don't justify every step, end up being seen as strange. And everything that is strange tends to generate fear. Low-profile people don't offer the world what it expects to consume easily. They don't spoon-feed everything. They don't reveal their intentions, their thoughts, their pains, and their plans in real time. And this creates a void, a blank space. And when a human being encounters a void, they automatically try to fill it with projections. That's where the problem begins. Because when someone doesn't explain themselves, the other person's mind creates stories. When someone doesn't expose themselves, the other imagines hidden intentions. When someone doesn't compete for attention, they end up being seen as someone who has something to hide. But what if, in reality, this person has only learned to keep to themselves? What if they have only understood that not everything needs to be shared to be real? Low-profile people don't usually engage in ego battles. They observe more than they speak. They feel before reacting. They choose silence not out of fear, but out of awareness. And this deeply destabilizes those who live in constant need of affirmation, because silence acts like a mirror. It reflects insecurities, needs, and internal conflicts that the noise tries to hide. There's something deeply disconcerting about someone who doesn't need to explain themselves all the time, someone who doesn't rush to show results, who doesn't announce their moves before executing them. In a world where everything is performance, those who live with silent authenticity seem dangerous, not because they hurt, but because they reveal. They reveal that it's possible to live without constant applause. They reveal that it's possible to have depth without spectacle. Perhaps the fear isn't in the low-profile person themselves, but in the involuntary comparison they provoke. When someone feels whole in silence, it confronts those who only feel alive when they are seen. When someone seems comfortable with themselves, it bothers those who live in internal war. It's not about superiority, it's about contrast. The contrast between those who seek outside what is lacking inside, and those who have already found a certain level of inner peace. And here's a delicate point. Low-profile people rarely try to impose their presence. They don't need to. Their presence imposes itself. There's an internal coherence, an emotional solidity that doesn't depend on external approval. This creates a sense of mystery. And mystery for many people is unbearable, because mystery cannot be controlled. Control is a basic need for those who live in insecurity, to know what the other person thinks, feels, plans, to have access, to have predictability. Low-profile people break this pattern. They don't easily give in to superficial readings. They don't lay their cards on the table. And this makes some people feel vulnerable around them, as if they were losing control of the narrative. There is also a deep emotional aspect to all this. Quiet people tend to have a more intimate relationship with themselves. They process emotions internally. They think before acting. They reflect before speaking, and this creates an aura of emotional stability. For those who live in internal chaos, this stability seems unattainable, and anything that seems unattainable can generate resentment or fear. Perhaps you have heard someone say that quiet people are difficult to read. And this is usually not a compliment, nor a direct criticism. It's a confession of discomfort, because reading others gives a false sense of security. When we can't read them, we feel at a disadvantage. But the truth is that no one should be forced to be deciphered all the time. The curious thing is that low-profile people are rarely trying to make an impact. They aren't playing a psychological game. They've simply chosen a different path. A path of less exposure and more presence, less talking and more listening, less reaction and more awareness. And this, unintentionally, ends up revealing the excess of the world around us. In social, professional, or even family settings, a low profile often becomes the target of distorted interpretations. It can be seen as arrogant, distant, cold, or overly mysterious. But most of the time, it's simply someone who doesn't feel the need to constantly assert themselves. Someone who understands that personal value doesn't need to be loudly proclaimed. And perhaps the most important question here isn't why these people are so frightening, but why their silence is so unsettling. What exactly does it awaken in those who feel threatened? What insecurity does it touch upon? What wound does it expose? Because fear rarely originates from others. It originates within. If you identify as a low-profile person, you may have already experienced this firsthand. Curious glances, veiled comments, attempts to label you, people trying to provoke you just to see your reaction. All this happens because silence, when not understood, becomes an invitation for projections. But there is immense power in not reacting to everything, in not explaining yourself to those who don't want to understand, staying true to yourself, even when it generates external discomfort. And if you identify more with those who feel disconcerted by such people, perhaps this is an invitation to reflection. What exactly bothers you? The lack of control, the absence of validation, the silent mirror they represent. Sometimes the discomfort isn't in the other person's behavior, but in what it awakens within us. Low-profile people are neither better nor worse. They have simply chosen a path of less noise and greater depth, a path that demands self-knowledge, well-defined boundaries, and a certain emotional courage. Because in a world that shouts, remaining silent is an act of strength. Perhaps the real fear isn't theirs. Perhaps the fear is realizing that there is another way to live, a way less dependent on the approval of others, a way more aligned with one's own essence. And this, for those who haven't yet found this balance, can seem threatening. In the end, low-profile people teach us something important without saying a word. They show that it's not necessary to expose yourself all the time to exist, that you don't need to justify yourself to be valid. That silence also communicates, and it communicates a lot. Perhaps after this video, you'll start looking at these people with different eyes, or perhaps you'll start looking at yourself with more honesty, because deep down, this topic isn't about fear. It's about awareness, about understanding what moves us, what bothers us, and what we project onto others without realizing it. If this resonated with you, if at any point you felt described here, know that this space is for deep reflections like this. Subscribe to the channel to continue this journey of self-discovery. Activate the bell so you don't miss the next videos. Share this content with someone who needs to hear this, and comment below if you identify more as a low-profile person or as someone who has felt disconcerted by another person's silence. This exchange can reveal more than you imagine.